Hi everyone, this is our PYP presentation.
The PYP theme that we chose is where we are in time and place. Based on this theme,
we chose our central idea. All human beings have the same rights. Our lines of inquiry are history of racial discrimination, slavery as one form of discrimination, and probably the roots of racial discrimination. And the second one is people that made a huge impact on justice and racial change. In order to explain these topics, we decided to recreate a TV show that we called 100 Georgians. This show is a quiz contest where two families compete to win the final prize. Throughout the show, the families will expose their true nature through their answers. Let the show begin! Hi everyone, and welcome to 100 Georgians! The show today will touch a very sensitive but still current topic, racial discrimination and how it impacts on our society. Today we have invited two families to see who has a better understanding of the history of racial discrimination and the people who fought against it. Let's welcome the Ford family and the Smith family. Let's give them a big round of applause. We wish you all the best of luck. Let's get started. Captains to the tables. So we will start with the first card. The theme is History of Racism. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions to each family member, and based on your knowledge, experiences, and values, you will give me your best answers. Your answers are going to reveal which family is more accurate, and for each correct answer, you will get 1 point. Let's start. Question number 1. Let's start with Mrs. Smith. The question is, what is slavery?
Well, slavery is taking advantage of another person and make them do a work for you.
That's a good one, Georgians. Yeah, very good. Now, Mrs. Ford, Karen, right? What is a slave to you?
A slave is a person that helps you do the work you don't want to or have to do.
Not sure about that. Let's see the correct answer, Georgians.
Correct answer. Slavery is a condition in which one human being is owned by another and is forced to work for that person without pay. A slave is a person that is denied the rights commonly held by free persons.
Very well. Now moving on to question 2. This is a true or false question. Question 2 is, most of African slaves went to what became the U.S. True or false? Your turn, Mr. Smith.
True. I think the U.S. had many slaves and they lived mostly in the southern states.
That's a good one. Now your turn, Mr. Ford.
True. I think the USA have most strongest and the most expensive slaves of all.
Well, let's see which one is the most accurate answer.
Correct answer. Only 4 to 6% of African captives went to the US. The majority of enslaved Africans went to Brazil and the Caribbean.
Well, in this case, none of you got the correct answer. However, it is correct that slaves in the colonial United States lived mostly in the South. It is also correct that slave trading was a game and the strongest slaves were sold at very high prices. This answer was not answered correctly by either of you, therefore there are no points earned by either family. Question number 3. What were slaves used for?
Well, they worked in farms, harvesting cotton, rice, and tobacco. But they also worked as domestic help, like maids and cleaners.
All right. Let's hear your answer, Christy. Christy, right?
Slaves were used to do jobs that rich people didn't want or had to do. Because, of course, they had slaves, and that's exactly what slaves were used for. Duh!
Ouch. That answer didn't sound so accurate. Let's see the correct answer.
Correct answer. The vast majority of enslaved Africans were employed in plantation agriculture, where they worked with their hands, planting, cultivating, and harvesting cotton, hemp, rice, tobacco, or sugar cane. However, they also worked as domestic help, such as cleaners, butlers, waiters, maids, seamstress, cooks, and launderers.
This point goes to the Smith family. Congratulations, you got the correct answer. Question number 4 now. And this question and your answer will tell a lot about your values. Let's go for it. The question is, was slavery right or wrong? And why? Let's hear the Ford family first. It's Christopher's turn.
I will definitely answer this one for you, as Chris' answer may not reflect the family's view exactly. Of course, there's nothing wrong with slavery. Slavery actually gave the slave the opportunity to work. They were given free jobs which otherwise they wouldn't be able to find themselves.
Okay. That was your answer. Now let's hear the Smith's answer. Don?
Slavery was, and still is, very wrong. It takes away the most basic rights of people. Slaves during the Atlantic slave trade were treated cruelly and unfairly and suffered abominable pain, both physical and psychological.
Correct answer. Slavery was very cruel to black slaves, especially the field hands. Slaves were beaten, whipped, castrated, branded, pierced, had limbs amputated, and killed in various ways. Many slave families were separated when members were sold. They were forbidden to learn and read and write, kept ignorant so they would not be aware of their living conditions.
Very well said, Don. Your answer is correct, and therefore your family got another point and is leading this contest. Now, last but not least, question number 5. What do you think are the most basic human rights? Smith family, you start.
I wrote them down on a pad. And the most basic human rights are the following: the right to equality and freedom from discrimination, the right to life, liberty, and personal security, freedom from torture and degrading treatment, the right to equality before the law, the right to a fair trial, the right to privacy, freedom of belief and religion, freedom of opinion and expression, and last but not least, freedom to acquire an education.
Excellent. Very elaborated and complete answer.
Okay, our turn now. The most important value is to be able to absolutely separate oneself from people that are so different from you and you have nothing in common with. It's the only way to live a fair life.
Smith family, let me tell you, your answer is absolutely correct. Therefore, you are the winners of the first card and the first topic of this show.
about the people that had an impact throughout the years of fighting against discrimination and how they did it. I will mention 4 names, and you'll have to tell us who they are and how they've contributed in the work against discrimination. I'll start with the first person, Nelson Mandela. Mrs. Ford, you may start.
The only important Nelson we know is Mr. Nelson Fisher, the owner of the social club that we belong to. He's a very fine man, extremely wealthy, and...
All right, Mrs. Ford. Thank you for your answer, but there is no need to continue elaborating it because nobody here knows your important friend. Mrs. Smith, would you like to answer?
Yes, of course I would love to. I had already. Well, Nelson Mandela was a civil rights leader in South Africa. He fought against apartheid, a system where non-white citizens were segregated from whites and did not have equal rights. He served a good portion of his life in prison for his protests, but became a symbol for his people.
Brilliant, your answer is correct. Nelson Mandela dedicated his life to fighting for equality and was also elected the first South African president in 1994. Next, this person is one of my favorites. Her name was Rosa Parks. Who would like to tell us about her?
Me! I know this one for sure. Rosa Parks was the creator of the Beauty Pageant Club of Birmingham. My daughter competed and won the Beauty Queen contest in 2010. Christy, of course, was chosen for her incredible physical attributes.
I see there might have been a bit of a confusion here.
Mom, that is Rosa Parks, and she's terribly annoying.
Mr. Smith, it's your turn to answer. Do you want to go ahead?
Rosa Parks was an activist in the African American civil rights movement, who became famous when she refused to obey the bus driver's orders that she give up her seat in the colored section to a white passenger, after the white section was filled. I absolutely admired Rosa Parks. She stood up for herself and defended her rights even though the law said otherwise.
Correct, Mr. Smith. And can anyone tell me what happened after this incident?
Yes. After the Rosa Parks incident, Martin Luther King, a Black Baptist priest, led the Montgomery bus boycott. The main purpose of the boycott was to protest segregated seating on public buses in Montgomery, Alabama. It was a non-violent protest that affected the bus transportation sector, as it was mostly Black people who used the bus.
Thank you, Summer, for your answer. You are very knowledgeable about the history of racism in the U.S. Congratulations. Now, do any of you know another important person who has recently fought against racism?
Yes, I do. In 2008, I voted for the first time, and I voted Barack Obama. Why did I vote him? Because I like his politics and proposals better than his opponents. Because you don't vote on the basis of personal appearance or something irrelevant. We can tell that he made history by becoming the first Black president of the United States. And it meant a lot for African American people, yes. But he didn't become president because he was Black. He became president because he was brilliant and offered a message of hope. He had big ideas for his country and worked hard, and people believe in his message.
Christopher, I think you are one of a kind, and you really do deserve this standing ovation. And as we end the show tonight, I would like to ask you one final and more personal question. This has no right or wrong answer. It just defines who you are as a person in this world.
Last question. What values do you hold most important and why?
We'll go first, if you don't mind. Our great values are dominance, hierarchy, and superiority. This is how we've been raised, and this is how we've been taught. And this is what we believe in. It is part of our pride as family.
All right, Mrs. Ford, that's what you've been taught. I think we all got that very clearly. Let's move on with the Smith family now.
For us, the most important values are equality, diversity, and non-discrimination.
Great, thanks. And why do you hold these values important?
Well, our families have endured discrimination, isolation, and humiliation. We believe this experience has strengthened our skills to be more open and empathic towards other people, especially those who are discriminated against. Discrimination is a destructive attitude. It's not knowing about the other person and therefore prejudging them. Like Martin Luther King said, people fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other. We must end racism by teaching our children good values.
Understood. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that. But your experiences have made you the real winners of 100 Georgians. Thank you, families, and congrats to the winners of this show.
What? That is not fair! What? I'm gonna call my wife.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed and learned a lot. See you in our next episode. Good night. Thank you all for watching, and we hope that you enjoyed and learned about slavery, racial discrimination, and the people that have fought and continue to fight for racial justice. To finalize, we made a couple of interviews, this time real people, who will tell us about their own personal stories and experiences with racial discrimination.
Hola, hola, Grisalita de África. Si en alguna vez me discriminaron por el color de mi piel, felizmente no lo he sentido, nunca lo he sentido. Y pienso que hay problemas tal vez de naturaleza negro que discriminan a los propios negros, porque es común ver los negros prefiriendo favorecer los de color blanca, dando los primeros lugares, considerarlos superiores. Y si yo trabajo para defender los derechos de la gente de color, en mi profesión como docente de pedagogía, tengo la posibilidad de trabajar con muchos jóvenes, preparándolos para la tarea de profesorado, y aprovecho este medio para inculcar en ellos el respeto por toda la persona humana en todas las condiciones de vida, condiciones culturales, diferencias de color y otras. Si conozco a alguien que ayuda a defender los derechos de la gente de color, puedo decir que en la universidad donde trabajo es común, es frecuente organizarnos y realizarnos conferencias de naturaleza nacional o internacional con el teor identidad personal, personalismo, los derechos humanos, y con eso el objetivo es respetar y resaltar la necesidad de convivir o de convivencia de personas diferentes. En este año, un colega de la universidad defendió una tesis para el doctorado con el tema relacionado con el albinismo, porque en Mozambique o en África, en estos últimos años hay un problema de persecución y secuestros de personas con el problema de pigmentación de la piel. Y con eso, este colega hizo un estudio, una pesquisa para percibir las causas y se dio cuenta de que la principal causa está relacionada con cuestiones de brujería. Si alguna vez pensé en ayudar o unirme a un grupo de personas que pelean por los derechos de gente de piel oscura, nunca pensé, tal vez porque la situación no me ha dado la posibilidad de pensar en eso. Tal vez decir que en Mozambique tenemos más del 90% de personas negras y eso no tenemos la discriminación así muy acentuada. ¿Cómo es la vida en África? Es una pregunta compleja. Como en todos los países, hay un poco de todo. Tenemos una minoría con posibilidades para estudiar, hacer estudiar a los propios hijos, frecuentar los mejores sistemas sanitarios fuera del país. En contrapartida, una gran mayoría con pocos recursos, viviendo de riqueza natural, de la agricultura, mucha pobreza, pero hay muchos valores de la familia, de solidaridad, de convivencia, que digo que es la riqueza de África. Y mucha voluntad de trabajar y vencer en la vida. Y si me gusta vivir aquí o prefería mudarme, me disculpa, mas me gusta vivir en África, me gusta vivir en Mozambique. Y tal vez esa es una característica de los mozambicanos. A mozambicano le gusta el propio país. Puedo visitar, disfrutar de otros países, aprender de la cultura de los demás, mas hay siempre la tendencia de volver en Mozambique.
Hello Mia and hello Antonia, and thank you for inviting me to do this interview with you. Great, so you've asked a couple of questions. I've got them on my computer here. And the first one was, were you friends with any dark-skinned people? That question makes me smile and makes me laugh for a simple reason. Where I come from, and when I was growing up, I was considered to be a dark-skinned person. Because in South Africa, people were divided into different groups, but the most important division was the color of their skin. So you were either white being from European descent, or you were not white. So everybody who was not white were people like myself, who were called colored, or people that we traditionally know as black South Africans or black Africans. And so all of them fell into the dark-skinned category. So do I know any people who are dark-skinned? Yes, most definitely. Let's see the next one. What was it like when you lived there? Well, living in South Africa when I was a kid, when I was your age, on one hand, it was obviously quite a normal life in the sense that we did normal things, we played normal games, we went to normal places. But there was always something different, something that you could sense that wasn't obviously normal. And that was that amongst those places that we were allowed to go to, there were some places we were not allowed to go to. Amongst those things that we were allowed to do, there were things that we were not allowed to do. For example, where I grew up in my neighborhood when I was a child, at the end of our road, there was a very busy main road. And my parents told me once, whatever I did, I could run around in my neighborhood on my bicycle and so on, but I was not ever allowed to cross over that main road. And one day when I was about 10, 11, 12 maybe, I can't remember, I decided to get on my bicycle and I decided to cross that main road. And when I got onto the other side of the main road, I was into an area where there were only white people living. In other words, no colored or no black people lived there. And the difference was absolutely amazing. All the streets were neatly kept. The grass was cut. The leaves were picked up. The trees that lined the street in comparison to where I lived. And that is one of the things that was very, very, very obvious and very different about the two, about growing up in South Africa. Also, all my friends were always all the same. By that I mean they were all like me, and they lived in very similar areas to me. I didn't have, like as is the case in South Africa right now, I didn't have black friends or white friends. They were always only ever colored friends. And that is one of the major things about my childhood that that perhaps for you is very, very, very difficult to understand. But we were not allowed to mix with certain people based on the color of their skin. Let's see the next one. Do you know of anyone who fought for black people's rights in person? Well, I was one of those. I'm going to attach to this interview now, I'm going to put a piece of a video. Although I'm not in that video particularly, but I was there. When I was at high school, in my final year of school, we were protesting very, very, very strongly against the government and against the idea of apartheid. And we fought for the rights of non-white people. And in the pictures that you see now, as I said, although I am not, you don't see me in any of the pictures myself, but I was there and I went to many of these rallies and we got into serious trouble with the police. It was very dangerous. And that is what we did. Have you ever felt ashamed or discriminated against from where you came from or what you looked like? When I grew up in South Africa, one of the things that was very powerful that was brought across very, very clearly is that people of color like myself were often made to feel very inferior towards people who were white. And there were lots of things that were said and done to non-white people to make them feel ashamed of who they are and where they come from and what they look like and what they have and what they don't have. I'll give you a few examples, and these are going to sound really silly to you. Seriously, if I think about it now, I can only imagine what someone who's never been to South Africa will say to this, but it's going to sound really silly. But one of the things that people of color were always discriminated against was their hair, okay? Because the white South Africans, these people who were the ones that were driving apartheid, they had it in their heads that if you have blonde or straight hair, okay, then you were good and you were a white person who's come from Europe, and that was okay. But the moment you had slightly curly hair, or God forbid that it was short and curly, as is the case with many black people, obviously, then that was considered very, very, very bad. And people were often reminded of that. In fact, there's an example which is horrible. It's a horrible example. But it didn't happen to me personally, but it happened to my mum when she's obviously much older. When she applied for a job or whatever, she had to have a test. Now listen to this. Listen to how stupid this sounds. The test was the person conducting the test would take a pencil and put it into her hair. And if she shook her head like that and the pencil dropped out, then she was okay. She would be considered okay for the job because her hair was soft and straight enough. Now, I would challenge any of you to do that test today. Some of you will fail the test, just like my mum failed the test because her hair was curly and the pencil didn't drop out. I would challenge you to do the same thing. And then you can see just how silly and how ridiculous an exam that was, or a test that was, to determine whether someone is capable or able to have a job. Have you ever seen people bullying dark-skinned people? Unfortunately, yes, I have. And as I said earlier, I was one of those who were bullied. And bullied is not even the right word. Treated badly, hurt, physically hurt. I can tell you an example. I was at a demonstration, like you saw in the video previously, and the police arrived and they told us that we had to leave. And before we had a chance to actually leave the demonstration, the police, again, I'll show you a video clip just after this, the police attacked us and beat us with whips and beat us with batons, which is like a big piece of wood, like a small baseball bat almost. And I got beaten over the back. It was horrible. My friend, who was not so lucky, the whip, this long whip, came over his shoulder and opened his face up. Okay, so yes, I have seen that and I have been a part of that, and it's not nice. It wasn't nice then, and it isn't nice now. Okay, yep, and that's it. There are no other questions. Well, I hope that these questions serve to show you how silly human beings can be towards one another, often because they are scared of each other, often because they don't understand each other, often because they don't want to take the time to understand one another. And of course, it isn't only about black and white. Never forget that. It's about people who are different, anybody that's different. So I hope this video is going to mean something for you guys, and I hope you have an excellent exhibition. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. John and Mrs. Cristalita, for sharing your experiences with us. We are truly shocked, Mr. John, that you had to go through all these horrible experiences, but also really proud of you for fighting for racial discrimination rights. Because as Nelson Mandela said, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite.
Before we finish, our final movement was to make a site. We had put a lot of people that had made something to the impact. We put a link that goes to a YouTube channel that you can see a lot of biographies. You can also see a little text that talks about the history of the racism. And you can see people, two experts talking about their own experience. So I recommend you going to the site and check it. That is really interesting. Bye!